The U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday delivered a major setback to President Donald Trump's immigration enforcement strategy, refusing to lift a lower court order that prevents the deployment of National Guard troops on the streets of Chicago. In an unsigned order, the conservative majority court said the administration had not, at this stage, demonstrated any clear legal authority allowing the military to be used to execute federal law in Illinois. The ruling marks one of the most significant defeats Trump has faced at the top court this year, particularly on its emergency docket. The decision drew sharp dissents from Justices Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, and Neil Gorsuch, underscoring deep divisions within the court over presidential power and the domestic use of troops. Despite the ruling, the White House insisted that the administration's broader immigration agenda remains intact. Spokeswoman Abigail Jackson said Trump had activated the National Guard to protect federal officers and property and to prevent violence and destruction, adding that nothing in today's ruling detracts from that core agenda. Legal experts described the decision as a strong rebuke of the administration's attempt to rely on a little-used 1908 statute to justify federalizing state guard units. CNN Supreme Court analyst and Georgetown law professor Steve Vladek said the order effectively undercuts the administration's legal theory and makes it difficult to justify similar deployments elsewhere. He called it the court's most consequential loss for Trump this year, warning that it could derail efforts to send guard units into other Democratic-led cities. At the heart of the case was a dispute over whether federal law allows a president to deploy the National Guard when regular forces are insufficient to execute U.S. laws. Illinois argued that the phrase refers to the standing U.S. military, not civilian agencies such as Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The court appeared to agree, stating that the law likely applies only in circumstances where the military itself could legally enforce the law, something that does not extend to routine immigration operations. Justice Brett Kavanaugh sided with the majority but expressed concern about the broader implications of the ruling. While agreeing that regular forces refers to the U.S. military, he cautions that the court's interpretation could limit a president's flexibility in responding to unforeseen emergencies, such as an imminent attack on federal property when troops cannot arrive quickly. Illinois officials welcomed the decision as a victory for state authority. Attorney General Kwame Raoul said the Constitution deliberately restricts the circumstances under which the federal government can deploy a state's militia over its objections, adding that those conditions do not exist in Illinois. Governor J.B. Pritzker echoed that view, calling the ruling a win for democracy and a check on what he described as the administration's repeated overreach. The ruling leaves Trump with limited but not eliminated options. Legal analysts note that he could still invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy troops, though doing so would be politically sensitive and historically controversial. For now, the court's order keeps National Guard troops off Chicago's streets, reinforcing long-standing limits on the domestic use of military forces while the legal battle continues.
There were disturbing reports that when the top uniformed attorney in the Army raised concerns about the legality of using National Guard soldiers and other DoD resources for immigration enforcement.
Safety in our community is paramount, but these deployments do not make our streets safer. They do not keep our families more secure. In fact, it is just the opposite. Our troops deserve to know why they are being asked to do such legally unprecedented and deeply unpopular things on American soil.
A fierce political storm is erupting in Washington as leading Democratic senators accuse the White House of abusing its authority over the military. At a tense defense officials hearing, Senator Tammy Duckworth condemned President Donald Trump's nationwide deployment of additional National Guard units, calling it a lawless overreach that undermines the very concept of American constitutional order. Duckworth warns that the move has nothing to do with law and order, accusing the administration of freezing and slashing federal police support while expanding military presence in multiple states. Her criticism was immediately reinforced by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who blasted the deployment's staggering price tag, more than $2 billion, funds she said were intended for military training infrastructure, family housing, and crumbling barracks.
In recent years, violent crime, rioting, drug trafficking, and heinous gang activity have steadily escalated. Now, I would be remiss at this time if I did not recognize that in trying to restore that law and order, there are costs. In particular, I'm reminded of the 2 West Virginia National Guard members who were shot in this city just before the Thanksgiving holiday. The public sees these examples of crime in their communities, and they expect more from their government. They demand and deserve action. For this reason, President Trump ordered an immediate and coordinated response by deploying the National Guard to some of our nation's most dangerous cities. These strategic deployments are not only appropriate, but essential.
Safety in our community is paramount, but these deployments do not make our streets safer. They do not keep our families more secure. In fact, it is just the opposite. Instead, President Trump has taken our troops away from their core mission just to do his personal bidding, forcing them to patrol tourist areas in D.C. or invade a city where residents are peacefully protesting his inhumane policies. We know Trump's actions are not about so-called law and order. If he cared about law and order, he wouldn't have quite literally defunded our police by freezing and slashing federal dollars that help to hire, train, and equip law enforcement. Enabling the president, any president, to send military troops into American cities under transparently flimsy pretexts to meet his whims will have a dangerous and profoundly damaging impact on our nation's military. Our heroes did not sign up for this. They signed up to defend Americans' rights to free speech, not to intimidate Americans from exercising that right. Our troops deserve to know why they're being asked to do such legally unprecedented and deeply unpopular things on American soil. And make no mistake, this is deeply unpopular. Most Americans don't want this. Poll after poll has found that a majority of Americans oppose deploying troops for missions that should be handled by law enforcement.
It's been 6 months since President Trump and Secretary Hegseth deployed the National Guard onto American streets. The investigation that I just released with several senators on this committee found that DOD has footed the bill for more than $2 billion in support of the Department of Homeland Security and immigration enforcement. That's money that was meant for military training facilities, crumbling military barracks, schools for military families, and instead, it was spent on deploying our National Guard to pick up trash in Washington, D.C., and deal with civilian protesters in other cities. So I think we are right to ask the question about how this happened. Mr. Young, you are one of the senior attorneys at DOD. You were the acting DOD General Counsel when the decision was first made to deploy the National Guard to Los Angeles. Now, if an attorney raises concerns about the legality of military operations, do you think the appropriate response is to tell them to shut up and get out of the way?
I'm sorry, Senator, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, if a JAG attorney raises concerns about the legality of a military operation, do you think the appropriate response is to tell them to shut up and get out of the way?
Senator, the law provides that military judge advocates are able to provide independent advice to military commanders, to the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Secretary of the Army.
And I'm asking you about the appropriate response. Do you think the appropriate response is to tell them to shut up and get out of the way?
Senator, I'm not aware of a response of that nature.
I'm asking you if you think that would be an appropriate response. It ought to be an easy yes or no question.
But by whom, Senator?
By you.
Senator, not that
Mr.
I'm
Young,
aware of.
there were disturbing reports that when the top uniformed attorney in the Army raised concerns about the legality of using National Guard soldiers and other DOD resources for immigration enforcement, You told him to stop meddling in state affairs, and then shortly after that, Secretary Hegseth fired the JAG officer with no explanation. Mr. Young, the report does not have a direct quote, but is it true that you said something along those lines?
Context of that is that the officer was wanting to comment on whether the state, in a state capacity, could provide personnel who were in a state status, not in a federal military status, not part of the Army, to help assist. And so we have many missions, Senator, that are occurring on the border right now. We have 3,000 approximately National Guard personnel.
So your answer is to confirm that report, and that is what you said. Is that right?
That is not what I said.
So you're saying you didn't say that?
I did not say that.
Well, I'm glad you said you didn't say it, because this is not the only report of JAG being sidelined by this administration. And I'm glad you think it might be inappropriate for JAG to be sidelined. More recently, the senior JAG at Southcom was reportedly overruled when he objected that the boat strikes near Venezuela are extrajudicial killings. Look, these deployments are not just legally questionable. They come at an extreme cost, and they come at the cost of mounting billions of dollars, and at reports that it hurts troops' morale.